Good morning and welcome to the first of the Scaling Up Back to Business webinar series hosted by the Santa Cruz Valley Economic Development Corporation in partnership with the Santa Cruz Valley Chamber of Commerce. I am Holly Schroeder. I am President and CEO of the Santa Cruz Valley Economic Development Corporation. We are a nonprofit that is focused on growing and retaining jobs in the Santa Cruz Valley. We are a partnership with the city, the county, and the private sector and the academic sector in that purpose. And we're going to have our work cut out for us in the months that come as we look at reopening our economy and helping our businesses get back to strength. I would like to also introduce our partner in this, John Musella with the Chamber of Commerce. Go ahead, John, you want to do a welcome?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks so much, Holly, and good morning to everyone. My name is John Musella, and I'm representing the Santa Cruz Valley Chamber of Commerce this morning. We are the leading business advocacy organization in the Valley, representing a 65,000 member workforce for the third largest city in Santa Cruz or in LA County. On behalf of the Chamber, thanks so much for joining us today. We're obviously pleased to be partnering with the SCV EPC and believe this is a great opportunity to work together for our business community. Now, with the governor's announcement on Monday about plans to start to reopen part of our economy, it's really a critical time to launch our Back to Business webinar series about scaling up here in the Santa Cruz Valley. And frankly, it's great to actually be talking about getting back to business and beginning an economic recovery, which is so badly needed for all of our businesses and this economy. The Chamber and the SCV EDC are obviously proud to be standing with our business community as we all adjust to this new world. We want to thank Holly and the SCV EDC and Wells Fargo for this great partnership and look forward to having you all join us throughout this entire series. And thanks too to Ken, Brian, and Joe for sharing their information with all of us today. And with that, I want to turn it back over to Holly as she introduces our panelists. Thanks so much, Holly.
Thank you, John. Yeah, so we, as John said, this is, I think, a really important time. We're going to be having our businesses getting back to business, perhaps scaling up, making adjustments to how they implemented the safer at home orders, which were really our businesses had to turn on a dime and make this, make these adjustments and change their operations and start implementing new procedures and protocols. Was a little bit of a learning curve. And so we have three great panelists with us today to help us through that. And actually, we have Joe Pender from Bokke Labs rather than Leah. And so we are really pleased that we're going to have here. I'm going to start with Brian. So Brian is the CEO of Shimtech Industries, which is an aerospace supplier that fills all sorts of gaps on planes. I'll let him explain that more. Their local facility in the Santa Cruz Valley is Lamsco West, over off of the old road. And so, Brian, I want to thank you for joining us today, and I will turn it over to you.
Okay, well, I'm an aerospace person. I've been in aerospace my whole life. I grew up in the Bay Area, and when I came down to LA, I started working for Hughes Aircraft and then Boeing. So I spent a long time kind of in the corporate world, almost 20 years actually, with Boeing. And then moved into, can you hear me all right?
Yes.
Sure. Excellent. Then moved into smaller companies, a lot of times working for equity firms with aerospace companies that needed turnaround or growth or strategy realignment. So today I'm the CEO of a group of companies called Shimtech. And there's 3 companies in Europe. There's 4 in the United States, 1 in Washington, 1 in Mexico. And the main company, like Holly said, is here in Santa Clarita called Lamsco. We do kind of 2 business lines, a lot of small parts, fasteners, shims, brackets, clips, little detailed parts for airplanes. They're all high volume, high mix, mission critical kinds of parts. And then we also have a business line that does composite structures for the wings and the fuselage mostly of the airplanes. And so it's been a very interesting time for aerospace, as you can guess. No one's flying on airplanes these days, and the business is in quite a bit of turmoil. The business in Santa Clarita, and frankly all of the businesses in California, are essential businesses because we do a lot of military aerospace work, so not just commercial. And because of the military fighter jet supply and so forth and our government priority ratings, we've been able to keep open. And then I can share with you a little bit about what that's been like and some of our lessons learned from that.
Before I'm going to have you go into that, I am going to have you go into that right away, but we're going to try something here, Brian. And I'm going to ask, so you know who you're talking to, I'm going to ask a poll question. All right. So I tried this a little bit this morning. We're going to see how this works. So I'm going to launch this poll. Okay.
Cool.
So you should see a poll on your screen. You might need to punch it out in a window view from one of the buttons under the orange arrow. Oh, it looks like people are responding, so I think it's working. Very good. So if we just wait a moment. I'm going to close it in just a second here. A few more responses coming in. All right, I'm going to go ahead and close, and I can share that. At least that's what it tells me I can do. So you can see a little bit. We have people in a sort of a variety of situations here, really split. Some people are, fortunately, a decent number of folks are open with their pre-COVID staffing, but a number of folks have also reduced their staffing. So Brian, why don't you tell us a little bit about the journey that Lamsco and Shimtech have been on, and then we'll hear kind of a similar story from each of our other panelists.
Okay, that'll be fine. We put a really big emphasis on hygiene, and I think this is true of every business. Lots of sanitizers, lots of social distancing. In our case, we have a lot of machines for making these parts. So we physically moved out the machines to create more spacing. We put people on all three shifts. We used to be a predominantly kind of first shift, maybe half of a second shift company, but now we have three shifts that are completely balanced, including graveyard shift, so we can keep employees further apart. And then the salaried employees are working from home, while and then I guess I would also say in the factory there's a lot of 5S tape, staggered breaks and meals. All the employees wear masks and gloves. You would see sanitizers everywhere. We do temperature checking every morning. So to get admittance to the facility, you have to get temperature checked. And then last Thursday, we started swab testing all the employees. We contracted with a lab in West LA to do the actual testing for the COVID-19 virus, be it positive or negative. And we hired a nurse with an NPI number to do the swab tests. And we are doing initial screens right now. We got our first results in last night. And this is, maybe 150 employees times 3, right? So it's a pretty large pool of employees at 3 different California companies that we're testing. And then after the initial screen, we intend to test everybody once a month. So maybe a quarter of the employees each week, kind of on a rolling testing basis for the next few months. And our effort is to stop the spread of the virus, to give employees a sense of safety and protection, and to be able to quarantine where we need to.
Okay, that's great. That's great. You talked a lot about, you've done a lot of different social distancing and cleaning protocols. I'm going to wait on that. I'm going to go on and I have a couple more polls, but I'm going to go on and introduce Joe. Joe Pender is the president of Bokke Lab over in Centerpoint, and they've been a supplier of a lot of different cosmetic consumer type products, but made some changes in this past few months. So Joe, thank you for joining us. You have Leah, your HR manager, there with you, but I'm glad you were able to make it this morning. I will give you the floor.
Okay, so thanks for the time. Thanks everyone for your interest and involvement in this. I think it's an important cause. So not unlike Brian, our path has certainly been altered in the last 2 months. Bokke Labs was founded about 30 years ago. We've got 2 facilities, one here in Santa Clarita and one in Columbus, Ohio. Each location has 400 to 500 employees. We have some seasonality. We run a 3-shift operation year-round. That's been our model. That's been our plan. As Holly mentioned, historically, we've been a personal care manufacturer of cosmetics, shampoos, conditioners, body lotions, hand soaps. When the event happened, or when we started catching wind of the event 2 months or so ago, we did a handful of things with the idea that we felt, again, not dissimilar from Brian's, that our position as a soap manufacturer provided us this essential manufacturing classification. We got confirmation that we qualified for that. Our situation may be a little different. In Ohio, we didn't have that classification because in Ohio, we manufacture primarily perfumes. So what our strategy was, in order to try and ride through this pandemic, was to try and protect the employees. That our busy is typically August through December, and it was important for us to be able to maintain that relationship with our employees throughout whatever this pandemic was going to be. So we went through a lot of the same screenings and PPE events. Probably our biggest challenge in our facilities was social distancing, because we're limited to assembly lines, packaging lines that are limited in length. And depending on the speeds and the head count on each line, historically we would keep closer than the 6-foot guidance. Because we're already a operation, it was hard for us to somehow dilute the concentration of people across 3 shifts. So what we ended up doing is installing physical barriers between employees, front, back, and side to side. So not unlike when you go into a voter's booth where you have a little bit of a privacy moment, our employees were surrounded with that. So our goal has been, from the very beginning of this, is to provide employees a safer work environment than what they'd find outside the plant. That's been our primary goal. We, as a initial, and I guess one of the guidance or suggestions that I'd have is when this pandemic hit us initially, we were highly concentrated in products that would not be considered essential. And as a result, more than half of our customers shut down or suspended operations. So our volume, last year we did in our 2 locations, from a scale point of view, about 250 million pieces. Our volume reduced by close to 60% almost overnight. So what we did, one of the things we were fortunate about is that one of our product segments requires alcohol. So we protected that alcohol supply and pivoted into sanitizers. And one of the things that Holly helped on that, actually, one of the resources that we're grateful for, is that in trying to pivot from into sanitizers, we needed to have some sort of regulatory help through the FDA. So we got Holly involved and asked her to knock on some doors to see what she could do to try and facilitate that. We benefited from this FDA guidance that allowed a particular type of sanitizer to be manufactured under cosmetic GMPs as opposed to OTC requirements. And because of that, we were able to quickly shift our operations from making shampoos into making sanitizers. And then we went to our customers. Thankfully, our customers had relationships and strength to get it to market. We leveraged their supply chain and distribution out, manufactured our products, and in California, we've been able to sustain operations. We had a good month, surprisingly, in April. We're projecting a better month in May. So we've been very fortunate by really leveraging an entrepreneurial spirit of pursuing opportunities as opposed to being limited by some of the barriers that we've got.
Yeah, great. It was an impressive pivot. So, and and I don't think the need for sanitizers is going to go away anytime soon. We're going to hear from everybody is going to keep using it as a regular part of operations. So I'm going to go on and introduce Ken, and I'll remind everybody there is a questions box. We're going to take questions by text. So if you have questions, please put those in. So Ken Wiseman is the former CEO of AMS Fulfillment. He has handed the mantle off to a few others in his both in his family and in the company, and now is leading their workforce development efforts, which is a real passion of Ken's. Ken, I want to just thank you for, I think AMS Fulfillment is obviously a third-party logistics fulfillment company, and Ken, I'll hand it to you.
Very good. AMS has 4 facilities, about 550,000 square feet here in Santa Clarita. We also have operations on the East Coast, but I'll stay focused today on our West Coast operations. I think it was about 2 or 3 days after we signed a sublease on a 120,000 square foot building with the intent of moving into another 100,000 square foot building within a month, that it all hit the fan. So we were established as an essential business. The fact that we are distributing consumer products for over 60 companies, even though much of those products you might not consider essential, the business we're in is essential. The ability for us to be ready to, at a minute's notice, ship out tens of thousands of orders to consumers all over the country. So right away, when the retailers closed, we saw about a 60% reduction in our business. We polled our employees in a survey and found that we had a number of employees who were willing to go on furlough, and we had about 75 at the peak go on furlough. And that matched our business needs at the start of the COVID virus period. Over time, similar to what Joe was describing, many of our consumer products, particularly in the beauty category, started producing essential products. And just because perhaps of the stimulus check and all, we've started seeing an amazing pickup in business. The likes of a Black Friday kind of direct-to-consumer business. So we are very busy now. We're in the process of ramping up, we've heard Alexi's all going off and later. We're ramping up right now, trying to bring 20 people.
Yeah, real quick. So I'm gonna do that unallocated, the before and after on JPMS.
Great.
So you want me to do a comparison, basically, of what it is now? Well, not now,
I'm not sure what that is.
The prior, right?
Okay.
Sorry about that. Kenton, please proceed. That was.
So I'm going to focus on going from a staffed facility to ramping up and bringing back individuals. And I'm going to do that from sort of the perspective of unemployed. So Joe, and I'm now Joe, I just got a call from my manager. AMS is saying that they're really busy and they want me off unemployment. I'm excited. I've been off for 6 weeks and I want to go back. So the manager said, okay, we got to first go through an interview process. If the interview goes well, we're going to invite you back. If it doesn't, if there's any questions we have, we're going to refer you to a local healthcare facility that we've worked an arrangement with, who will help screen individuals coming back. So I did my interview and it came out well, and I can report to work next week. So now I'm walking up to AMS. I've been told I'm going to meet the vice president of operations at the door. I noticed that there's studio type bathroom trailers outside. My manager would later tell me that they've doubled the bathroom capacity so that they have more time to sanitize in between usage on it. So I thought that was pretty cool. As I walk in the door, they take my temperature, and I start looking around, and there's my VP of operations and our safety manager. And for the next 20 minutes or so, I'm off onto an orientation. And that orientation is to catch me up on all that's happened since I went out 6 weeks ago. So as we walk through, I noticed some people with sanitizing solution and masks on, and I don't know them, and I ask about them, and they're a third-party group that we brought in. We brought in about 9 people who spend their entire day walking around and cleaning surfaces, very visible, so that everybody's very aware of our efforts to keep clean. I noticed these portable stations here and there. Some are sanitizing stations, some are hand washing stations. Signage is everywhere telling me to keep my distance. I see tape on the floor. When I go over to the shipping area, I see they've spread the shipping area apart, and the assembly lines, they've taken out every other position so that people are not up against each other. People are walking around with these really cool AMS masks that were made right here in Santa Clarita. And I was given one when I walked in the door, and I was told that masks are going to be a must. The gloves are there if I want them, but we're told that you don't have to wear them. So then at lunch, I'm told that there'll only be 2 people per table, 1 at either end, and that they encourage us to go outside, hang out at the picnic tables, but still keeping our distance, but there's more airflow outside, and stay in shady areas. And wow, I'm really seeing a lot of change. As I'm walking through one area, you know, I'm seeing people I've known for years and they're waving to me, but then I noticed I got the cold shoulder from a few people too. And I said to my manager, what's going on? You know, why am I getting a cold shoulder like that? And the manager was, you know, you've been gone for a while and there's a lot of change here. And these folks, you know, they're looking out for their family and they're nervous about us bringing back new employees. And you're one of those new employees, even though you've worked here for many years, you need to understand that people are going to need to learn that you're looking out for their safety just as they've been looking out for each other. And I said, okay, all right, I'm gonna have to be careful of that. So I'm told that most of our office personnel are going to continue working from home for a while to keep down the numbers of people that are in the buildings. And as I walk around, everything looks like, you know, there's been some really good change, and yet they're really, really busy, which they weren't when I left. So I get to work, go to see my manager, and I'm often working. And first break that comes along, I call my cousin who's still on furlough with AMS, and I said, you won't believe, it's amazing. It's amazing all that they've changed there. And Erica, the one she called, said, I'm not amazed. That's just the way they do it. That's a true story.
Well, thanks, Ken, and I appreciate the telling in a sort of first-person sort of experience. For you or Brian, perhaps, can you, we've had a couple people ask, can you tell a little bit more about the temperature testing? How are you managing that? Brian, why don't you start and we'll go back to Ken, but just tell a little bit about logistically how you're managing that and at your office.
We have, it's actually a factory, so we have different stations, and employees are prearranged to come in through certain doors. We have a laser scan thermometer system. We have hired a nurse that does the testing, and there's a little form that people fill out in advance that say they're willing to do it. Everyone, 100% have said yes. And then there's contact or procedures, the protocols we've established if they're running a fever over a certain threshold. So we're following CDC guidelines. You have to be over like 100 degrees, I think, Fahrenheit to trigger a second test. And then if there's continued, you know, high temperature, great. I have to tell you though, one thing, it hasn't been catching anything. We've had 3 positive cases in our San Diego plant. All 3 cases were younger people who lost a sense of taste or smell. That was their only symptoms. They were subsequently tested positive. They had been coming through the temperature scanners, no problem. So we're going to continue to do the temperature testing, but I'm not sure that it's a really good screen. It's just easy to do, and I think responsible to do, but I don't think it offers really a lot of protection.
Ken, your experience?
Yeah, so we think that the temperature testing is just one part of our overall view of what's going to keep our employees safe. We, the last several years, been working on our employees being partners in keeping our operations safe. In the last 27 months, we've only had one lost time injury. If you were to compare that to our industry, it would equate to the average would be 27 people who would have had lost time injuries. Or if we were Amazon, it would have been 60 people that would have had lost time injuries. We had one. And that's not because of our managers, that's because our employees have been trained to look out for safety issues, whether they're ergonomic issues or whether they're true safety hazards like slip and fall or something they could be cut on. And when you open everyone's eyes to safety, then you really are able to cut down incidences. So yes, we take temperature, but we also talk to everyone about being comfortable in speaking up when somebody's coughing or sneezing or where they don't feel comfortable being around people. And in some environments, people feel that they could get in trouble for speaking up. We make it clear that we want to hear about it and that we're all one family here and we've got to look out for each other. And for that reason, I think that we have lots of things that are being looked at very carefully in our operation because of the number of eyes we have with our employees.
Do you mind if I share, Holly, a little bit about what's happening right now with our testing program?
Yeah, please.
It's kind of fascinating because, and I strongly agree with everything, Joe, you were saying and Ken about hygiene and constant cleaning of surfaces and distancing and masks and gloves. In our case, they're mandatory, but I think these are all really, really important protocols. Employees can do a lot to watch out for each other in these situations. Having said that, we got our first test results back last night, and out of a population of 120 tests of employees, these are swab tests, 11 of them came back positive. None of the 11 have symptoms of any kind. So we're now asking ourselves, okay, we're going to do a second test today. We're going to make sure, okay, do we have some false positives perhaps? So we're going to, for each of these 11, we're going to do a second round of tests and see if they test positive a second time. But assuming that they do, and if most of them do, it's still a very interesting situation where we're now discovering about a 10% population of asymptomatic carriers in our workplace. So we're trying to figure out, okay, how do we respond to that? Because if you start multiplying that by all the degrees of freedom and the contact that they've had, it quickly starts to cover the whole plant. And so it'll be an interesting adventure. We've all been flying blind a little bit, right, for the last few months in this country without a lot of testing. And I think perhaps we're finding that there's more prevalence of the virus than we had appreciated. And we're trying to figure out as a business how to quarantine. Again, we're trying to adhere to the CDC guidelines. They tend to change every few days, oh, by the way. So keeping up with them is an adventure also. But I just thought I'd share with you the experiment that we have going on. And I appreciate what you're saying, Ken, about the safety culture. But asymptomatic carriers is a tricky one, right?
Yeah, we're going to, it's sometimes the questions you ask and you get an answer and you're not then sure what to do with it.
Right.
Tell me a little bit, and then I'll just open this up to anybody. How have your employees, and Ken talked about a little bit in terms of the safety culture, how have your employees responded to the changes that you're making? How is it affecting the dynamic within your plants, your operations? How does it affect your culture? Kind of what's ahead there?
Really great appreciation for the help from the employees themselves. It's funny because before we started the testing, both temperature and actual swab testing, we had a bunch of labor lawyers that told us that maybe this wasn't the greatest idea. There were personal privacy issues and such. But it's been the opposite, in fact, as we proceeded regardless. And the employees have been enthusiastic about participating. They know that we're trying to stay in business, not only for our defense customers, but for their jobs. And they also know and see visually, like you described, Ken, it's apparent that we're trying very, very hard to keep the workplace safe, and we're involving them in that process of keeping everyone safe. We've seen, as a management, pretty good productivity among the factory workers, despite this distancing, despite the 3 shifts, and even among the stay-at-home workers, of which all of our engineering people and administrative folks are working from home. So it's been a very, very good reaction, and I would say very high morale right now under an uncertain time, higher than I expected.
Good.
So
Joe?
Holly, yeah, sure. A couple things. Back to the question about how we processed employees on their arrival and departure. We go through the similar screening. We have questionnaires. We do temperature checks. We've altered our shift starts and shift ends so that instead of having 120 people a shift, all converging at the same control point, we've tried to distribute that. We likewise have, we do testing basically every time someone comes and goes from the plant. Over the month and a half we've been doing this testing, I don't believe we've had a single individual that did not pass the testing. If you define the testing, the CDC guidelines, including questionnaires, not a single individual has passed it. Yet we've had a handful of employees that have ended up showing symptoms and reporting to their healthcare provider and being tested and confirmed that they've got COVID. And then we've gotten involved in that process. And we look back, a couple of those hadn't been at work for more than a week. So we've had to respond appropriately in communicating to those that they may have come into close contact with for extended period of time. Deep cleaning and sanitizing, shutting down equipment, basically quarantine areas until we're back in place. Back to the how has our workforce responded to it? I think in all honesty, they're afraid, just like a number of us are afraid. You know, this is a nasty virus, it appears to be, and not a whole lot that can be done about it right now. So the only thing that we've done to try and comfort their fears is to be very present with our efforts to protect them and to communicate that as often, as frequently as we can, not through words, but through actions. To communicate, even when we've been notified that an employee's tested positive with symptoms. One of our employees actually was released from Henry Mayo about a week ago, and we kind of celebrated that. So we've been very open and honest in communicating the situation, and we've continued to evolve. I think our controls are better than those laid out by the CDC. The other thing we've done, 2 other things. We came up with a Bokke Cares program so that those employees of ours, if they're not, unlike furloughing or work sharing, we basically said our workforce is, a lot of them have been with us long enough that if they're unable to, we're unable to keep them busy for 40 hours a week, we pay them for the full week anyway. So if their week is cut short, we pay the entire period. That shows, I hope, caring, and that combined with how we're protecting them helps mitigate to some degree some of their fears. The other thing we do is that we're not requiring anybody to come to work. We basically said we're doing everything we know to do. We believe that our environment is safer than what you'll experience, likely even in your own home. But if you still choose not to come to work, that's a personal decision. We'll be here when you're ready. And then, of course, if somebody takes an extended period, we go through the same type of screening that Ken had mentioned before we onboard them again. I think one of the other questions that we're dealing with now, again, going back to, we've screened a lot of people in both our locations for a long period of time. Not one has failed the screening, yet we've had a handful that have been tested with symptoms away. What do we do if somebody at home has symptoms, and in the screening when they come in, they say, yeah, my sister has symptoms at home. I share a bedroom with her, and I'm here and I'm fine. So we've made the decision to send those people home. And then the question comes, all right, how do we make sure, again, this is really a practical business question as much as it's an emotional humanity question of how these people didn't get sick on purpose. How do we make sure they're not harmed financially by their sickness? How do we mitigate that? And from a business side, how do we make sure we take away the question from their mind of, do I sacrifice my dollars or I sacrifice my coworker's safety? So what we tried to do is prevent them having to make that decision by saying, we'll make you whole financially, because we value your safety and the safety of your coworkers so much. So if somebody, if they present, a doctor's note that says they've got a coworker at home that's sick, or that they've tested positive even though they don't have symptoms, then they stay home for 2 weeks and we pay them. If they fail our screening on incoming, we send them home for 2 weeks, they get paid. Again, all with the idea that we're trying to protect the workforce, we're trying to protect individuals, and at some point we're going to get through this, and we want to still be together.
Ken, anything you want to add? Are there external, there's a question that just came in of, I'm not sure if any of you run a union shop. Are there external influences, and how are you balancing, what you just talked about, Joe, of somebody doesn't want to come to work, but they, because they're fearful, but you've still got to run the business and you want to set the culture. I mean, this is a real,
Yeah, sure.
This is, very intricate and very difficult to sort through. So I'd like maybe Brian and Ken to respond a little bit and how you've been handling that same complex question in your businesses, because it's tough.
Well, we have been leveraging a number of great programs that are out there to help. Similar, Joe, to what you're describing, when we don't have full-time work for individuals, we did file for and get accepted for work share. So AMS pays for that portion of time they work. Unemployment pays for that portion of any week where they only get to partially work. We've been doing that, the FMLA emergency program, and quite frankly, the one that's concerning a bit, and I'm happy for my employees who are making twice their income on unemployment right now. But some employees really want to just stay home and not come back to work because they're making, on top of regular unemployment, $600 a week more. And you sort of can't blame them. So we've been trying wherever possible to adhere to, this was voluntary from the start for almost all of our employees. And we're trying to call back folks who really want to come back to work now. But there's definitely some pushback from some who prefer to get ahead on their bills right now with the lucrative unemployment that's being paid. But we're trying to mix it up too. We had Turkey Day just before Easter, where we call it Giving Thanks instead of Thanksgiving, and gave everybody turkeys. And every week we have a lunch program, and we're exploring doing sort of a give back on those that have been working throughout this period of time. We try to do a lot of motivating things too to keep everybody excited that's worked their way through this whole virus period. People are afraid. Of all times, empathy in our management style is more important than ever. Some people feel that they are risking their lives coming to work, and as long as you're doing everything you can, and they feel that the choice to be there is theirs, then they'll be productive and you'll have an engaged employee. But if they feel that they're there because they have to be, and that you're not doing everything you can for their safety, there's going to be trouble. We did a survey 2 days ago, and 1 to 5, 5 being the best, how is the company doing keeping your safety? How are my managers doing, and how are your associates? 98% were 3 and above in our sampling, and 64% gave us 5s across our employee sampling. And so we were real pleased with that, and our managers got the highest portion of that scores. So we're working through our managers, we've trained them that they've got to show our employees just to care for them.
Yeah, we've had a similar experience to what you described, Ken. I guess the only thing I would add and just emphasize, one-on-one meetings with each employee. Every case is different. There's issues with daycare, there's issues with a sick person in their family at home, there's just general fear. We explain what it means to be an essential worker, under our government guidelines, And in most cases, employees, after you show empathy and you give them time to describe their fears, you talk to them openly and transparently about what's going on, we found almost all of them have kind of changed their mind and said, you know, I think I'll be fine coming to work. In some cases, we've made some financial accommodations for like daycare arrangements, and we're doing the kinds of things that Joe described also to make sure people are made financially whole. We're relying on a lot of employee goodwill, really, to be an essential worker, to be part of the team, to help us keep in business. And also explaining that in the long term, they might be getting a paycheck for now, but it doesn't help the business survive and keep everybody's jobs going if they choose to stay home when they don't really need to. And it's been pretty good. I would say we probably are dealing with maybe 3 or 4 employees at this stage out of several hundred, maybe 400 or 500, that I kind of wonder, oh, I'm not so sure there, right? That they're not just taking advantage of the system. But almost everybody, when you talk to them with empathy, one-on-one, give them time, respond to their concerns, it generally works out fine.
Yeah, I would add, Brian, I think just one piece of that, you know, and I think, Ken, you spoke to it too with your giving thanks comment. I think it's pretty difficult to demonstrate caring if now is the first time you're doing it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So if you've established over time a relationship with the workforce and your coworkers, that you do care, that we're in it together through lots of little stuff that adds up to important stuff, then what's going on now with these efforts to try and keep them safe comes across the right way. So that's the thing. I think if it's always been a us against them relationship, you know, a management against employee base, it's going to be difficult to demonstrate that trust now. So it's never too late. Certainly it's better now than never, but I think that's one of the things it sounds like we've all benefited from, you know, a good solid relationship with the workforce. One other thing, I guess a real specific question or answer to your earlier question, Holly, that came from the group was, we're not a union shop. And the only thing that I think we've done to try and supplement any sort of surprises in our workforce is that we do have a percentage of our workforce that's through our staffing agencies. And so they've been leveraged a little more than normal to try and fill in the gaps. But we really had, I think, a good, you know, Ken, you brought up a good comment. I wrote down that we're gonna act on this week, that we've certainly communicated with the employees, but and we've put boxes up everywhere you can see, almost as often as you see a sanitizer. We've got suggestion box up. But I think a nice formal survey of how we're doing probably makes a good amount of sense right now, and try and do it as a friendly and partnering way as we possibly can.
So we are coming close to the end of our time. Earlier this week, the governor laid out a path for how, for the phases and specific some timelines for the phase entering phase 2 later this week. What do you each see as things start opening? What do you see for your future of your business, and just sort of what's kind of your outlook overall? And why don't we start with Ken, and we'll go back around the other way here.
Well, I'll say that we started seeing a real spike in business about a week or 2 ago, and our inclination, not sure that it was just a temporary spike, was to leverage employees who wanted to work overtime. And we had a lot of people that wanted to work. But one thing about overtime is it's really great until it's not. And if you overuse overtime, even though people may on one hand seem like they want the income, it's tough on them in these times to be doing a lot of overtime. So I caution for people to not try to leverage too much overtime at a time when family is more important than ever to these folks. And people may feel guilty, like they should work overtime. We need to take that away and just keep their life balanced a bit.
Brian, what do you want to add on that?
Yeah, I think the thing that's difficult for aerospace is airplane travel is way down, as you know. Airplane build rates are down accordingly, and the future is pretty uncertain. So we're doing a lot of liquidity modeling. We're trying to forecast a new world order for the next 2 or 3 years, I would say, for aerospace to get back. A lot of it's predicated on there being a vaccine by, say, first quarter of this next year that allows air travelers to get back on planes and begin traveling again, and starts the recovery of our industry. But in the meantime, we are planning most likely scenarios and worst case scenarios to create guardrails for how we manage the business, given the uncertainty, and believing that the future will fall somewhere in between those guardrails. And we're doing that to size the businesses correctly for revenue, for how we handle agency employees, that, like we were mentioning earlier, overtime, and of course, cash management. And so these are things that, we've always done a pretty good job of managing our businesses' financials, but we have now, I would call, a laser focus on liquidity and what it might look like for what in aerospace would be a multi-year problem. It won't be a quick recovery. So we're looking at a longer overhaul and trying to peer into that future with our modeling. Does that help, Holly?
Yeah, that's great. Well, I wish the news was better, but yes.
Yeah, right.
Joe, what's the outlook?
Yeah. From our customer base is probably 3/4 either professional hair salons, or not direct, but through the brands that we deal with, and or mall retail, both spots that are in a tough area. So certainly as we look forward, those brands are altering their two consumer models. They're focusing more on e-commerce and alternate sites. So we think that's going to be helpful. A couple of our smaller accounts have gotten involved in more mass retail, and we have fully invested in soaps and sanitizers, because we do believe that that's something that's going to be with us a while. Thankfully, it runs on similar equipment as does the rest of our business. So our product mix will shift as we go forward. Our outlook for the year, we do budgeting and forecasting, and outlook for this year will be consistent with what it was about 6 months ago. So surprisingly, through the very different customer mix, very different product mix, but we're going to pivot and somehow recover. One of the things that Brian mentioned, I'm wholeheartedly, I am hoarding cash wherever we can. So we're accumulating cash. We're being very careful with the credit risks we're taking with our customers. That's changing. We've looked into tools that historically we haven't worried about, like receivables insurance and so on, just to try and protect it. Because while we may have been fortunate in pivoting around this problem, not all of our customers are equally fortunate, and all it takes is to reach a little too far on a customer credit risk, and we're going to get ourselves in trouble. So that's kind of what our outlook is from a business. Holly, you'd asked kind of one other question that I'll kind of finalize my comments on, as a recommendation as we look forward to those of us that are kind of have been through it for a couple of weeks but are still learning, and those maybe that are ready to go get it. More now than ever, stay close to your customers and your suppliers, your key suppliers, because their lives are changing as much as ours, and through communicating, it's critical. And even more importantly than that, stay close to your employees, and don't underestimate the emotional impact the pandemic has had on them.
Yeah.
We think, some of us are older than others and younger and have different work or personal life experiences that allow us to deal with stress differently. This is a real thing for a lot of people, and the more empathy we can supply those that we rely on, the better off we are.
Great closing words there, Joe. So I want to thank all of you for joining today. I hope those of you listening in found this useful. We are doing, as I mentioned, a series of this. Our next webinar is on Friday. A little bit more of an orientation on business to consumer companies there. And then next week, continuing on the discussion of sort of the human element, both the legal aspects of bringing people back to work on Wednesday, and then more the cultural and morale and personal elements on Friday, again with another panel of speakers next Friday. Some resources that you should know about, if you're not aware, obviously the EDC and the Chamber are really pleased to bring that to you. We want to remind you that as you are hiring, reach out to America's Job Center if that is a tool that would be helpful for you as you are bringing people back. Also, SCV EDC's job board called Live Work SCV is free for all employers to post. We know that as you're looking at bringing people back, you're going to have a balancing of some of the issues that Ken raised around people's choices. You're not going to necessarily bring back all the same people, so we want to make sure you're aware of that resource as well. I want to thank you for joining us. This webinar was done with a grant from Wells Fargo. We want to thank them for their support. Thank you all for being here. Hopefully you will join us again for a webinar in the future, and thank you again to our panelists. Have a really great day. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Holly.
Thanks.